They say Southern women age like oak trees, stronger with every storm. I never quite believed that until the day my family mistook my kindness for weakness. My name is Irene Caldwell. I'm 70 years old this past May, a widow of 17 years, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina, in a two-story brick home that my late husband Harold and I bought back in the spring of 1982. We raised 2 children in that house, and now every creak in the hardwood floors, every wisteria vine climbing up the porch columns, they all carry stories. The story I'm about to tell you began on a humid Friday afternoon under a striped tent in my backyard during a graduation party I organized for my granddaughter Lena. She's 18, clever, observant, and one of the few people in my family who truly listens when I speak. She was the first in our bloodline to get into Davidson College with scholarship money, and I wanted the celebration to reflect that. We had peach tea in glass pitchers, lemon squares from old Mrs. Tremblay's bakery, and paper fans for the guests. I even rented a quartet of students from the College of Charleston to play soft jazz in the background. It was meant to be a day of pride, a fresh start. But if you looked past the smiles and sun hats, you'd sense the tension hiding behind the deviled eggs. I paid for the entire event myself. The tent, the food, the chairs, the band, even the printing of custom invitations. Everything was drawn from a $17,800 escrow fund I'd set up months prior for Lena's graduation. My lawyer, Mr. Jacobson, had helped me separate the funds from the family trust I'd managed since Harold's passing. That escrow was meant solely for Lena, no misinterpretation allowed. I mentioned the trust just once that day, over on the side deck while I was sipping a cold glass of tea with my son Mark and his wife Darlene. After the party, I told them casually I planned to amend the trust with a new codicil, something that'll make Lena the first direct beneficiary outside of the immediate LLC arrangement. Darlene's smile tightened like a drawstring. "Isn't that a little premature, Mama Irene?" she said, brushing imaginary lint from her linen skirt. "Not at all," I said, letting my voice settle like stone. "Lena's earned it." Mark chuckled in that empty way he does when he's nervous. "Well, I mean, it's your money, technically." Technically. That word always shows up when someone's about to cross a line. You see, ever since Harold passed and left me executor of the family trust valued then at $2,000, my children have treated me less like their mother and more like an obstacle. Every withdrawal required my sign-off. Every investment had to go through me. At first, I thought it was just discomfort with the paperwork. But over time, I realized they didn't want stewardship. They wanted control. So I kept quiet about some things, like the Ring camera I'd recently installed above the garage tucked under the hanging ivy, or the fact that I'd shifted 51 Fundtrum voting power of our family LLC into a new holding with a clause that activated upon misuse of fiduciary trust or deception. They didn't know that part, not yet. That night, after the guests had gone home and the folding chairs were stacked neatly beside the shed, I poured myself a splash of bourbon and sat out on the back steps. Lena came outside barefoot, carrying her leftover graduation sash in one hand and a paper plate of brownies in the other. "Best party I've ever had," she said, dropping beside me. "You didn't have to do all that, Grandma." I patted her knee. It wasn't for show. It was a promise. A promise. I nodded. That this family will change one way or another. And you're the start of it. She smiled, uncertain. "You're talking like a prophet again." "I'm just an old woman who reads the wind," I said. But the wind that night carried more than change. It carried warning. I went to bed feeling something was off. I always place my trust papers originals with notarized seals in a small fireproof box tucked inside a drawer of my bedroom bureau. As a habit, I checked it every week. That night I didn't. I should have. Because by the following morning everything would begin to unravel. Not with a shout or a storm, but with the quiet sound of entitlement turning into theft, and betrayal captured in high definition. I've lived long enough to know that evil rarely announces itself with a bang. No, it slips in while you're distracted. And that Saturday morning I was distracted, scraping dried frosting off the punch bowl when I should have been checking my lock drawer. It wasn't until I went to fetch the codicil, the amendment to my trust that would formally name Lena a direct beneficiary, that I realized something wasn't right. I opened the drawer, entered the 4-digit code on my fireproof box, and felt the chill crawl up my back. The codicil was gone. At first I thought maybe I had misfiled it. I flipped through every folder in the safe, then checked the false bottom just in case. Birth certificates, old deed titles, even Harold's military discharge letter, everything was there. Except the codicil. Now, I don't panic easily. When you've buried a husband and nursed a daughter through 2 failed marriages, you develop calluses on the heart. But this wasn't just about a missing piece of paper. This was about intent. Someone had entered my bedroom, opened that drawer, and taken the document meant to secure Lena's future. I walked out of the room without touching a thing. Went straight to my study, opened the Ring app on my phone, and cued the overnight footage. I scanned past the last guests, leaving the quartet packing their instruments, the sprinklers turning on at 2 a.m. Then just past 3:30 there it was. Darlene. In a silk robe and fuzzy slippers, hair wrapped in a scarf, she moved like someone who knew exactly where to go. Walked up the staircase without turning on a light. Took a key from under the hallway vase, a key that I'd moved 3 weeks ago. Then she stopped in front of my door, hesitated, and entered. She stayed there for 11 minutes. I watched her leave with a manila folder tucked under one arm. The footage ended with her glancing toward the camera, not directly into it, but close enough. She didn't know she was being recorded. Not yet. I should have confronted her right then. But I'm a firm believer in patience, the kind that lets liars tie their own knots. Instead, I called my bank. There, the next shock awaited me. Mrs. Caldwell, the agent said after verifying my details. There was a wire request flagged for manual review this morning, from your secondary account. My stomach tightened. What kind of request? $17,800. Initiated from a mobile device, requesting transfer from your escrow account into a new checking account under Caldwell Family Management, LLC. That was not an account I authorized, and it sure as hell wasn't escrow usage for Lena's college fund. Was it processed? No, ma'am. The request was frozen automatically due to a new security flag you added last month. Any outgoing wire over $5,000 triggers manual hold and verification. Thank heavens for that. I told the agent I would call back once I confirmed the origin. Then I opened my inbox. Right there, sitting in my sent folder, was the smoking gun, an email I didn't send addressed to the bank's fund manager authorizing the wire. But the signature line was off. The font didn't match. The spacing was awkward. It was a forgery. Now let me be clear, I wasn't scared for my money. That part was locked down. What made my jaw tighten and my fingers tremble was the level of premeditation it took to do this. First, Darlene accessed my bedroom. Then she took the codicil. Then someone forged an email pretending to be me. Then they tried to move nearly $18,000. All within 12 hours of a party I had paid for. And all while smiling over iced tea and congratulating Lena on her honors cords. I stepped onto the back porch, still barefoot, still in my housecoat. The garden was quiet except for the hum of cicadas and the occasional drip from the sprinkler hose. And there she was, Darlene, sitting at the wrought iron table by the roses, texting with one hand and sipping coffee with the other. I watched her for a moment, trying to decide how much she thought she had gotten away with. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, Mama Irene. Did you sleep okay?" I nodded slowly, like a rock. Well, that party was perfect. Everyone kept saying it was better than the city gala. I pulled out a chair across from her, steadying my tone. "Did you happen to go upstairs last night? I thought I heard someone around 3. She didn't flinch, just shrugged. Might have been Mark. He went looking for aspirin. You know how his back gets. I see, I said. She sipped her coffee again, avoiding eye contact now. I leaned in slightly. Funny thing about aspirin, doesn't usually come with manila folders. This time her cup clinked just slightly against the saucer. And that's when I knew. She didn't know I had footage. She didn't know the email had been flagged. She thought the codicil was all it would take. But she had misjudged me. And soon she'd misjudge a whole lot more. That Sunday morning, the Lord's Day, I sat through service at First Baptist with a still heart and a mind full of fire. Pastor Green gave a sermon on mercy and misjudgment. Fitting, I thought, given what was simmering just beneath the surface of my home. My family, my own blood, was about to learn what happens when you play chess with someone who's spent her life counting every dime and watching every move. After church, I came home to find a note taped to the fridge. Grandma went to brunch with friends. Thanks again for everything. Lena. But that wasn't what made my stomach twist. Next to it, scribbled in different handwriting, were the words, "We borrowed the card you left on the hall table to cover graduation gifts. Just a couple quick things. We'll circle back." The card. The card I had placed there absent-mindedly Friday night, still inside the folder I carried with trust documents. Or so I thought. I rushed to the hallway and yanked open the drawer under the mirror. The envelope was there, sure enough, but inside it wasn't my actual credit card, the one tied to my account. It was a dummy card, a bank-issued promotional sample they sent me weeks ago, bearing my name, gold-plated edge and hologram, but not connected to any real funds. I kept the real one locked in my fireproof drawer, unused, unopened, waiting to be activated for specific legal disbursements. Which meant they had taken the dummy, mistaking it for the real thing. And I hadn't said a word. Not yet. Now, most folks might have stopped there and laughed, but I didn't find it funny. Because I knew my family. If they thought they had access to my money, they would start making moves. Big, bold, stupid moves. And sure enough, they did. That afternoon, Lena returned from brunch in tears. She slammed her phone on the table and collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into the throw pillow. "What happened, sugar?" I asked gently. She looked up, face blotchy. I don't even know what's going on. Mom told me she got me a new laptop and a designer bag as graduation gifts. But when I checked the receipt in the group chat, it said it was purchased using your card, and then Dad forwarded a screenshot saying you'd authorized it as a surprise. I blinked. A group chat. She nodded. Family one. I wasn't supposed to see it. But Uncle Brent accidentally sent me a screenshot with the wrong caption. It said, and I quote, "Don't worry, Irene thinks it's a test charge. She won't notice until the escrow clears." Test charge. They thought I wouldn't notice over $1,200 spent at a designer store. Then came the knock at the door. It was my neighbor Carol, HOA secretary and certified gossip. "Irene," she began delicately. "I hate to be the one to bring this up, but, well, there's been a complaint. Your guests yesterday, someone parked in the garden median, and a few folks saw a black SUV unload what looked like luxury shopping bags onto your porch. HOA's filed a memo." She handed me a folded copy, already printed with my address timestamp and fine amount $5 for first offense, a slap on the wrist. But it wasn't the fine, it was the principle. They weren't even being discreet anymore. After Carol left, I made a pot of coffee and sat by the window watching that same SUV roll up the driveway. Out came my son Mark, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a smug little smirk on his face. Behind him, Darlene carried a new handbag still with the tag attached. And Brent, my other son, was on a Bluetooth call talking about scheduling a lease signing for the investment suite. When they walked through the door, I greeted them like nothing was wrong. Darlene said brightly, "Hope you don't mind we put some graduation purchases on the card. We'll sort it next week. The bank said you've got a 30-day grace period anyway." Mark added, "And hey, if you need us to move any money around for you, like liquidate something to cover that escrow withdrawal, just let us know. We already created a shared folder." "Shared folder," I echoed. "Yeah, Brent made a Google Drive for the Caldwell family budget. You've been added as viewer so we don't overwhelm you." The audacity. They'd built a financial empire off a fake card. So I said slowly, "You've been spending." "Freely." "Oh, just a few charges," Darlene said with a wave. "Mostly for Lena. New MacBook, a few outfit pieces, a gym membership to start the college journey. And the luxury bag." She blinked. "Also for Lena." Lena turned bright red. "I never asked for any of that. I told you I didn't want expensive stuff." Mark interrupted. "Come on, baby. Don't embarrass your grandmother. She's always so generous." "I didn't authorize any of this," I said evenly. Silence. Darlene laughed nervously. "Wait, what, you left the card on the table. It had your name. And you thought that meant permission?" "Well, yes." I leaned forward slightly. "Interesting. Because that card doesn't work. It's a dummy, promotional, worthless." Their faces fell like a curtain. "What?" "It's not connected to any funds. It's not real." Brent walked in from the kitchen holding the dummy card. "This one?" I nodded. "Exactly that one." "So, the purchases?" Darlene asked, her voice cracking. "Oh, you made them all right," I said, folding my hands, "but not with my card, which means either you used your own or committed actual fraud." Mark dropped into the chair like he'd been shot. Darlene whispered, "But we told everyone it was covered by you. We posted in the group thread. We sent screenshots to Lena's friends." Lena stood abruptly. "You used Grandma's name to show off." "We thought," Brent began. "You thought wrong," I said, standing. "And now you'll face what real debt feels like. Because here's the thing. I could have ended it right there. I could have told them the truth, that their charges weren't real, that the receipts were doctored by themselves and the card never worked. But I didn't. Because they needed to sweat. To feel the weight of what they claimed they'd spent. To learn. And for once, I was going to let the lesson hurt just enough to stick. By Monday morning, the house felt like a church after confession. Quiet. Awkward. Everyone walked on eggshells, unsure of what came next. But I knew. I spent that morning at the kitchen table with a legal pad and calculator, sipping chicory coffee and sketching out a repayment plan as if the debt were real. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because my family had never once stopped to consider the weight of their actions. They thought money just appeared. That someone like me, an old woman, a widow, had nothing better to do than bankroll their poor decisions. I was going to show them otherwise. By mid-afternoon, I called a family meeting. Voluntarily or not, they all shuffled into the living room, Mark, Darlene, Brent, and even Zoe, the niece, who had quietly borrowed a Ring camera battery without asking. Lena sat on the armrest beside me, arms folded. I laid the yellow legal pad on the coffee table. "This," I said calmly, "is your monthly minimum payment schedule." Darlene blinked. "Our what now?" "I estimate that collectively you've spent about $15,000 across designer goods, tech gadgets, deposits, and brunches, all under the assumption I would pay. Since you believe I covered it and told others as much, I think it's time you experience the reality of debt." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You're not serious." "I am. And you should be too. Because if you had used my actual credit card, that's exactly how this would have gone." I pulled out a second sheet. "At a 22% interest rate, your monthly interest alone would come to around $3,003 annually, if you only made minimum payments, that is." Brent scratched his head. "Wait. So how much per month?" $425. Rounded. I've split it proportionally based on who benefited the most." I handed out printed slips. Mark and Darlene $175 each. Brent $75. Zoe $50. Contingency tax shared $20. I added that last line just to watch their jaws drop. "What the hell is a contingency tax?" Brent snapped. "It's what creditors call a risk buffer. You wanted realism. I'm giving you realism." Darlene opened her mouth, then shut it again. Mark rubbed his temples. Zoe looked at her paper. "What if I can't pay this right now?" "Then I suggest you liquidate whatever you used my name to buy." "But we didn't use your actual card." "No," I interrupted. "You believed you did. You paraded it around. You posted receipts. You bragged to friends. And now that you think you might be on the hook for it, suddenly you're nervous. Good. That means the lesson is working." Lena tried not to smile. Zoe muttered, "This is like financial theater." "No," I said. "This is what adulthood looks like." Mark sighed. "Okay, fine. Let's say we agree to this plan. Where does the money go?" I gestured to a shoebox beside the fireplace decorated in gold foil and labeled Caldwell Repayment Fund. "For now, there." They stared at it like it was a coffin. Darlene tried her hand at negotiation. "Could we at least pay digitally Venmo?" "I don't use Venmo," I said, "but I'm happy to accept cashier's checks." Mark exhaled like I'd asked him for a kidney. I stood. "Payments are due on the 1st of each month. Miss a deadline and interest compounds." "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Brent mumbled. "No," I said. "I'm remembering who raised me to be responsible, and wondering why that didn't carry down a generation." They left one by one. Darlene lingered behind, placing her slip gently on the table. "We didn't mean harm," she said softly. "We just assumed you wouldn't mind." "That's the problem," I said. "You all stopped asking before you started taking." That night, Lena and I went over the Ring footage again just for reassurance. She asked why I hadn't shown it to them yet. "Because fear teaches faster than evidence," I said. Then I got to work. I called my friend Miss Ruthann from the HOA, asked her to help me fabricate a letter warning about pending lien activity due to a family dispute over ownership. She wrote it in perfect bureaucratic legalese and dated it for next week, just enough time to stir paranoia. I also called Mr. Jacobson, my lawyer, and asked him to notarize a new codicil with one small addition. If any family member attempted to circumvent escrow, their share of the trust would be deferred until Lena turned 25. He approved it that afternoon. Meanwhile, Lena printed fake account summaries showing imaginary charges on my non-existent credit line. We stuck one to the fridge like a utility bill. By Wednesday, Mark showed up with his first payment, a money order for $100 and an envelope full of ones and fives. "Short this month," he muttered, "but I'll make it up next round." Progress. Darlene dropped off a $50 Visa gift card. "Partial repayment," she said, eyes downcast. Zoe sent me an email titled First Installment and attached a Walmart e-gift card. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the change in posture. The tone. The slow bloom of accountability where arrogance used to sit. I sat on my porch swing that evening with Lena beside me, watching dusk settle on the hydrangeas. You think it's working, she asked. I smiled. They're starting to sweat. That's step 1. And step 2. Let them stew a little longer. Then we hit them with the police. She laughed. You're terrifying. Not terrifying, I said, patting her hand. Just finally done being underestimated. The showdown didn't come with thunder or lightning. It arrived in the form of a potluck. You see, every second Saturday of the month, our HOA hosts a community gathering out on the main lawn. Folding tables, crockpots, bundt cakes, and gossip Charleston tradition. I figured it was the perfect opportunity. If a lesson must be learned better, learned in front of your peers. But first I needed 2 final ingredients. The notary, Mr. Keene, a former student of mine back from when I kept books for the middle school, he owed me a favor and I cashed it in, told him to come with his seal and clipboard, dressed sharp but quiet. The second was a local police officer, not for arrest, just presence, a uniformed reminder that some mistakes don't stay in the family. I called Officer Lyle, who happens to be Carol's nephew, explained the educational demonstration I had in mind. He agreed to drop by, provided no laws were truly being broken. I told him, not yet. But we'll stop it before they try. The morning of the potluck, I baked cornbread, folded my lawn chair, and slipped 2 laminated envelopes into my purse. One contained the ring footage from that midnight theft. The other held a printed screenshot of the family group chat where Mark wrote, "Don't worry, Irene's blind to how escrow works. By the time she notices, we'll have shifted the account to our LLC." Below it, Brent replied with a laughing emoji, and the words, "Worst case, blame it on Lena. She's the golden ticket anyway." I planned to show both items publicly. But fate, as always, gave me a better twist. Around noon, while folks were setting up folding chairs and slicing lemon bars, Carol came bustling across the lawn, waving her phone like a tambourine. "Irene," she whispered, "you need to see this." It was a viral post on Nextdoor, already racking up dozens of comments. "Is the Caldwell family under investigation? Saw 2 men carrying luxury boxes out of Irene's garage last week. Something shady going on with trust money. Anyone else notice the cop at their house Tuesday?" Below were replies. "Heard her granddaughter's college fund got drained. Classic embezzlement. Not surprised. Mark always gave pyramid scheme vibes." It took me a full minute to register what I was reading. They'd already been found out by rumor. Sometimes you plant a trap. Other times it sets itself. Still, I had one more turn of the screw. At 1:30, I stood up from my chair, tapped my glass with a fork, and called everyone's attention. Behind me, Mr. Keene stood with his notary seal. Officer Lyle leaned casually against the HOA sign, arms folded. "My name is Irene Caldwell," I said. "Most of you know me as the lady with the blue hydrangeas and the funny bird mailbox. Today, I'd like to clear up a few misunderstandings about my family's finances. And in doing so, I'd like to restore something far more valuable: trust." I saw Mark shift in his seat. Darlene turned pale. Brent fumbled his sweet tea. I held up the ring footage on my tablet. Pressed play. There she was, Darlene creeping into my bedroom at 3:41 a.m., pulling the codicil from my drawer. Gasps. I held up the group chat screenshot next. Showed the highlighted messages. Then I gestured to Mr. Keene. "This gentleman is here to notarize an official codicil reinstating Lena Caldwell as primary beneficiary of the escrow-based trust. The prior version, which was removed without my knowledge, is hereby void." Mr. Keene nodded, clicked his pen, and began signing. Finally, I turned to Officer Lyle. "This officer is not here to arrest anyone today," I said, cool and calm. "But he is here to confirm that unauthorized access to financial documents, even by family, can be considered attempted fraud." Silence fell like a dropped casserole. "I'm not pressing charges," I added, "yet. But the codicil now includes a clause: any further attempt to move, disguise, or reroute funds outside of authorized escrow pathways will result in immediate legal action and permanent exclusion from the trust." I looked at my sons. "I know what you did. I know how far you were willing to go." Darlene started to speak. I raised my hand. "No speeches, no apologies yet. Save that for someone who doesn't have the receipts." Lena stood beside me, her expression unreadable. I reached into my purse and pulled out the dummy card, holding it between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. For those wondering, this is the card they thought gave them access to 2 Febe Trier Dola. People chuckled, but the shame settled like heat. I smiled finally. Turns out entitlement isn't a valid form of identification. Then I dropped the card into the trash bin beside the lemonade table. After the potluck spectacle, the whispers quieted. But inside my house, the air hung thick like the marsh fog at dawn, silent, heavy, and waiting for something to break. No one said much the rest of that day. Lena helped me wash dishes, and I caught her smiling at the dried-up dummy card now taped inside my spice cabinet. Your family stole nothing but laminated plastic, she'd said, shaking her head. They waged a war over monopoly money. I waited until Monday morning to call the final meeting. Just family. No neighbors, no witnesses, no uniforms. Only blood. We gathered in the dining room, the same one where Mark had once built a gingerbread house so detailed I thought it was real mortar. That was 30 years ago. Today he couldn't even meet my eye. Darlene sat stiffly beside him, lips pressed. Brent had the decency to look like he hadn't slept. Zoe, bless her clueless heart, brought a notepad and pen like she was prepping for a TED Talk on family reconciliation. Lena poured coffee for everyone, then took her seat at the head of the table, directly across from me. I let the silence stretch until the cream in Darlene's cup began to swirl on its own. Then I spoke. What I'm about to say is not to embarrass anyone. It's not revenge. It's truth. And truth is what you've been avoiding. I reached into my leather folder and laid 2 items gently on the table. One, a notarized codicil updated with a timestamp post-potluck. It clearly named Lena Caldwell as the first independent escrow beneficiary from the Caldwell Family Trust. Non contestable, non revocably active immediately. 2, a framed display of 2 nearly identical gold cards, one real, one fake. The room stiffened. This, I said, tapping the right one, is the dummy card you stole. It's plastic, hollow, no magnetic strip, no financial backing, a toy sent by the bank as a promotional sample. This, I tapped the left card, is the actual card. It's been in my safe the entire time. Darlene blinked. Brent dropped his gaze. Zoe let out an audible, "Wait, what?" Mark whispered, "You mean none of those charges were real?" "Number. But you believed they were. And more importantly, you acted like they were." Brent leaned forward, elbows on the table. "So, the shopping sprees, the ring footage, the memo from the HOA. All real. But the debt fabricated. Because I needed you to feel the weight of what you claimed." Zoe's voice quivered. The group chat. "Still real," I said. "Still your words." Darlene cleared her throat. "Irene, if you knew this, why let us go through all that? The embarrassment, the shame. Because shame," I said, "is a teacher, and you've ignored gentler lessons for years." Mark stood up, abruptly paced toward the window, then turned back. "So what now? You've humiliated us. You've locked the trust. You've shifted control to Lena. What's left?" I sipped my coffee, then set it down. "What's left," I said slowly, "is your opportunity to rebuild. Not with money, with honesty." Brent muttered, "We thought we were protecting family legacy." "No," I corrected. "You were trying to take it, and dress it in the language of loyalty." Lena opened her folder. "Grandma gave me the authority to establish a secondary oversight clause. I've written up a family charter. If you want access to future disbursements, you'll need to agree to 3 things. They looked up, unsure who this young woman had become. 1, Lena said, no financial decisions above $500 without escrow sign-off. 2, all expenses must be transparent. If you use my name again without consent, you forfeit your share. 3, monthly service in the form of hours, not dollars. Physical contribution. Darlene squinted. Service. Volunteer work. Church pantry. School tutoring. Meals on wheels. You log 10 hours a month. That's how you earn redemption. Mark said nothing, but his throat bobbed once. Zoe looked down. I didn't know we'd gone this far. You did, I said gently. But now you have the chance to come back. Brent rubbed his forehead. You played us. I taught you, I replied. There's a difference. Darlene's voice cracked. Why not just confront us? Because confrontation only bruises the ego. But letting someone believe they've wrecked everything that gets through the armor. Mark turned to Lena, voice low. You'd really block us from the trust. Lena didn't flinch. I'd rather be the generation that ends the cycle than one that excuses it. The silence that followed was the kind I'd been waiting years for, not awkward, not angry, just honest. Then finally Brent said the words I never thought I'd hear. We're sorry, for assuming, for taking, for forgetting you weren't just the bank but the backbone. I nodded once. That was enough for now. I'm not asking for perfection, I said, just change. And for the first time in a long while, I believed they might actually try. Rebuilding trust is not like flipping a switch. It's like rewiring a house where every socket has sparked before. You move slowly, carefully with gloves on. And sometimes you leave a few rooms dark just in case. The weeks following the big reveal were quiet but not cold. Everyone kept to themselves, processing what had happened. But more than that, they were trying not to trip over the mess they'd made. I didn't rush them. Instead, I spent my time meeting with Mr. Jacobson, finalizing changes to the trust. I removed any ambiguous clauses, reworded the codicil to include conditional clauses, and added a quitclaim deed provision, in case I decided to transfer the house early. Most importantly, I did something bold. I split the trust into 2 tiers. Tier 1 for Lena, controlled by escrow to be released in phases starting her sophomore year of college based on GPA community service hours and financial literacy check-ins. It was her reward for standing tall when the house around her trembled. Tier 2 for the others, locked behind a conditional power of attorney structure triggered only if each adult completed 1 full year of verifiable community service and passed a financial literacy test administered by an outside CPA. No exceptions. No appeals. The document was 42 pages long and ironclad. When I presented it at our next family meeting, the air was tense but not hostile. Mark brought a notepad this time. Darlene wore her glasses. Brent had shaved. "Why all the hoops?" Brent asked. "Because you're not entitled to money you haven't earned," I said, plain as day. Zoe surprisingly nodded. "Makes sense." I also opened a separate family LLC with 51 fund Trum ownership under Lena's name and 24.5 each under Mark and Brent. The LLC owns nothing yet, but if we ever decide to do real estate or business together, it will serve as the vessel. Mark raised a hand. "So Lena can overrule us." "She can veto misuse." "That's different," Darlene asked. "And what about the house?" I smiled. "We'll get to that." 2 days later, I met with the HOA board. I requested formal mediation to clear the record regarding the viral rumors, explained that the so-called fraud was a family misunderstanding, no crimes filed, no funds missing. They thanked me for my transparency. Carol pulled me aside afterward and whispered, "I knew you had a plan." That ring video was brutal. Sometimes I said you have to show people what could have been before they understand what was. At home, the changes started taking root. Mark picked up tutoring again at the community center. He started with math for 6th graders, then shifted to SAT prep. Darlene volunteered at the women's shelter, sorting clothes and filing intake forms. Brent got certified to teach financial basics through a nonprofit, ironic, given the mess he helped create. Zoe surprised us all by enrolling in an online bookkeeping course. "If I'm going to be the comic relief," she joked, "I might as well balance the budget too." Even Lena changed. Not hardened, but steadied. She started tracking the family accounts, preparing mini reports. Every week she sent me a 2-page summary of progress, mistakes, questions. She'd become the kind of leader Harold always wanted our boys to be. One evening we sat on the back porch, just the 2 of us. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Letting them think they'd broken everything?" I sipped my bourbon. "Sometimes. But then I see how carefully they walk now, and I know it worked." She looked out over the lawn where Mark and Brent were assembling a new garden swing. "They're trying." "They are," I agreed. "But don't mistake effort for change. Watch how long it lasts." She nodded, thoughtful. Then she asked something I didn't expect. "Are you really giving me the house?" I smiled. "Not yet. But I've drafted the quitclaim deed. If you still want it after your 2nd year, and if the family's steady, I'll sign." She blinked. "Even after everything." "Especially after everything." The next week, Zoe hosted our first family financial review night, popcorn, lemonade, and a whiteboard. Brent explained compound interest using a deck of Uno cards. Darlene presented a PowerPoint titled, "How I Thought Escrow Meant Extra, a Memoir." We laughed until we cried. Even Mark. That night, as I closed the ledger and turned off the porch light, I realized something. Maybe the card had been fake, but the transformation it triggered, that was the most real thing in our house. 3 months passed. And for the first time in years, the Caldwell house didn't feel like a courtroom, a vault, or a trap. It felt like a home. The irony. It took a dummy card, a worthless piece of plastic, to finally teach the people I loved that some things have to be earned, not expected. Mark still grumbled during our monthly service hour check-ins, but his tutoring students adored him. Darlene now ran the intake shift at the shelter with the kind of no-nonsense calm I used to beg her to use at home. And Brent, Lord help us all, started filing receipts without me having to ask. But the biggest change, they asked, before borrowing a car, before accessing shared files, before speaking on behalf of the family even casually. It wasn't submission, it was respect. And respect, when given freely, is more valuable than any inheritance. Zoe passed her online bookkeeping course. Lena helped her set up a side business doing books for local food trucks and yard services. She called it Z Ledger and printed business cards shaped like tiny dollar bills. Gimmicky, yes. But she was proud and for once not dependent. As for Lena, she began her sophomore year strong. Every scholarship document, every tuition receipt, she logged them, cross-checked them, and filed them in a binder so neat it made me tear up. She paid her own cell phone bill for the first time, too. When I asked how it felt, she said, like I bought my voice. And maybe that's what this whole saga was about, voice. Because for years, mine had been drowned out in the hum of entitlement, smoothed over by polite phrases like it's just family or she won't mind. But now, they listened. One chilly October morning, Lena and I walked to the county clerk's office. The building sat on Meeting Street, old brick and white trim smelling of printer ink and damp paper. She wore a gray coat, hair pulled back, eyes focused. "I brought the papers," she said, tapping her leather portfolio. I smiled. "You sure you want this?" She paused. "Only if you still do." I handed her the envelope, the quitclaim deed signed, sealed, notarized. Inside it, the transfer of ownership of the Charleston house to Lena Caldwell with occupancy delayed until her graduation. A symbolic gift, not just of property but of trust. When she handed it to the clerk, her hand didn't shake. As we walked out, she said, "I want to do things differently." "You already are," I replied. That night, we had one final family dinner around the oak table. Nothing fancy. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, sweet tea. But every plate was passed with care. Every please and thank you came without force. Near the end, Lena stood up and tapped her glass. "I have something to share." She opened a small wooden box and pulled out 2 cards, both gold, both identical to the one we'd fought over. She held them up. "One of these is real. The other is the dummy." Everyone leaned in, half laughing, half nervous. Guess which one started all of this? Brent raised his hand. "Honestly, doesn't matter. What matters is we don't mistake access for permission ever again." Zoe nodded. "Or silence for agreement." Mark added. "Or trust for a blank check." Irene, I didn't speak for a moment. I looked at their faces, tired, humbled, trying. Then I said, "If you've learned all that, then the card served its purpose." I reached for the dummy and slid it into the center of the table. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a relic. Now it sits framed above the mantel beside Harold's photo. A reminder. That respect isn't inherited, it's practiced. That family doesn't mean access, it means accountability. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Let the silence teach. Let the mirror speak. Because in the end, the card wasn't gold. But what we gained, that was solid, and lasting, and real.